Richard Marsden, CEO of Synairgen. Thank you for speaking with us today. Could you tell us a little bit about Synairgen and your growth journey as a company, and particularly what the highlights have been about your growth journey thus far?
Yeah, so we're a company that has been working on drugs for asthma and COPD for over 15 years now. And there's been one program which has progressed throughout this phase. We've looked at other things. We've had a collaboration which has been successful. But this has stayed as a program all the way through. And it's a drug, it's a protein. It's a protein we all make. And we make it as humans to mount an antiviral defense. We're interested in the lungs. We're a respiratory company. And the rationale to put it into the lungs is that a lot of people with asthma or COPD, which is chronic bronchitis and emphysema, are vulnerable to viral infections. It can make them quite poorly. So had we met 4 months ago, we would have been talking about us delivering this broad spectrum antiviral powerful drug into the lungs of people with COPD when they get cold and flu infections. We've always known that there could be a place for inhaled interferon beta, or SNG-001, which is the special formulation of interferon beta that we're using. So we've always known there's a potential for the drug to be used in the event that a scary virus came along, or an emerging pathogen, as we call them. And we were quite interested when swine flu came along, years ago. And we've always kept an eye out for news of these viruses coming along. So when this did break in January, I think the first internal email we had was on the 6th of January saying we ought to watch this. And it's just been one of those things, there's no precedent. No one who's working on this now has faced anything like this before. But we knew that delivering a potent drug which stimulates the innate immune responses, all our natural antiviral defenses, could be a really good idea. So since then, we've been flat out trying to get a program together and start clinical trials, which have now started.
Now, the business is working on developing this new treatment, SNG-001, to prevent and treat the severe lower respiratory tract illnesses that occurs in, I think it's about 1 in 6 people with the COVID-19 infection. Now, SNG-001 is an interferon beta-based therapy. So could you explain a little bit about what interferon beta is and what it does?
Ours is a very different approach. And if you talk to biologists about what interferons do, one of their major functions and how they got their name originally is that they interfere with virus replication. So think of a virus like a parasite. It wants to find a host, in this case the human, jump into the host and take over cells, replicate virus within the cells, pump loads of virus out so that it spreads from cell to cell and person to person. And in the early response, the human will recognize that there's a virus there, and it will just throw everything that's ever worked through evolution at that virus. So an interferon beta stimulates a couple of hundred different genes, and those will do all sorts of things to help handle this virus better. So, for example, infected cells will be pushed into a sort of programmed cell death. So the cell takes itself out for the benefit of the other cells around it, and take the virus with it before it's had its chance to do its dirty work. It will pull in the cavalry, which are white blood cells, which are brought into the lungs to clear up the infection and coordinate the infection response. But it will also warn other cells there's a virus about. And if a virus is inside a cell and it can't be driven into this apoptosis, this programmed cell death, then all sorts of complicators, for want of a better phrase, will be produced by the cell. And this is like putting a spanner in the works of what the virus is trying to do by taking over the machinery of the cell. So it's such an important first response, because the body just doesn't know what's going on at this stage. It says it's a virus, do everything, and interferon beta is critical to that do everything response.
Recently, Synairgen raised £14 million in a fundraise to help enable assessing SNG-001's effectiveness in
Yeah.
COVID-19 patients in a phase 2
Mm.
trial.
Yeah.
Um, so within the current climate and the pressures of that, what were the key decisions that you needed to make regarding that fundraise, and how difficult was it to progress?
Well, finnCap got a lot of interest for us from some really good institutions, and the fundraise was very successful. In terms of what we're doing with the money and why it was very important for us, well, we needed to fund kind of step one, which was the clinical trial that we have started. Um, the fundraising went very well, and that enables us to explore and hopefully very soon implement a home-based treatment paradigm. So at the moment, we're treating people when they turn up at hospital, but it'd be fantastic to get the drug into at-risk people in the home environment when they first develop symptoms. And this is going to require some technological steps and some creative thinking, but I'm confident that we'll be able to start this trial in the coming weeks. The other thing we're doing is making sure that we're in a good position in the event that we generate positive data. So we need to, when we get the results from the clinical trials we've started now, discuss them with regulators and then be in a position to implement the next steps straight away. And that requires devices for delivery of the drug to the lungs and more drug product. So we've started the manufacturing process to do that. And we're also looking right down the supply pipeline to make sure that in the event that everything goes well, we're in a position to provide millions of doses to patients around the world.
And how long do you anticipate before some conclusive evidence that clinical development has been effective will be?
Conclusive is a strong word when it comes to clinical trials.
Yeah.
I think the question is, when do we get our first bits of data? You know, the trial started. Logistically, it's working well. We'll give updates every so often to the markets, but you're never there until you cross the finishing line. And when we get the data, we'll sit down and discuss that with the agencies.
I mean, was there a big project to sort of redirect facilities and resources to meet the COVID demand, or did things almost happen quite organically?
Well, I think this is where we were lucky. The drug is in the phase 2 trial in COPD patients already. So really, for us, it's a sidestep. That, you know, the protocol for the coronavirus trial was probably 50% a cut and paste from the COPD trial, and probably trivializing lots of days' work there. But it also meant that we've got drug sitting there. So we always make more than we actually need for the trial we're running. So we could use that drug and placebo immediately for a coronavirus trial. And I think one of the difficulties we have at the moment is that some of the drugs which went into early trials, you know, these were tablets sitting in pharmacies. Some of them were generic drugs, some of them are development drugs, but not all of them had placebo as an option to use in the clinical trial. And to get an answer, a clear answer quickly with as fewer patients as possible, then it helps to have placebo as your control arm.
And obviously, you mentioned earlier that you were watching COVID-19 from as early as January as something that, you know, your candidate could be applied to.
Mm.
Um, I mean, can you describe how it felt as a business and as the head of the business when things transcended from being quote unquote normal trading to being quite literally on the front line of battling the virus? Obviously, you received expedited trial approval. I mean, is there an added weight of responsibility that you're feeling there?
There's some strange elements to this. I mean, we are extremely busy right now as a company, and there's a level of adrenaline in the company because we realize we've got something that could work out to be really, really helpful. So we just work very hard at putting the drug in the right context to make sure it gets tested properly. Because what we don't want is a grey result. We want to get definitive data as quickly as possible. so that the drug can move towards approvals as quickly as possible. We've got to do that in dialogue with the agencies. So yes, there's a weight of responsibility, but I think we're wearing it well. It's not it's exhausting, and in the most bizarre way, it's kind of very stimulating. We feel very alive, and that's right, because this is kind of our moment. And this will be the same, hopefully, across hundreds of companies around the world who are doing something. And we hope it's us that turn out to produce the data, which would be a major breakthrough in looking after these patients. But as long as there's lots of us, someone's going to come up with something, or some, it might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 companies who come up with therapies which are helpful. We need that. So we feel it's our moment, and I'm sure there's 100 of me saying we feel it's our moment right now, and I imagine they are as wired as we are.
Absolutely. Richard Marsden, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.